What's going on, everybody? It's that time again. The AllSooners Podcast, episode 146 on this wonderful Wednesday, September 28th, 2022. Week 5 already of the college football season. Moving right through Oklahoma, TCU this weekend as the Sooners try to pick up the pieces after losing to Kansas State last weekend. Josh Callaway in Oklahoma City, Ryan Chapman and more, John Hoover in Tulsa. Gentlemen, how are we doing? Excited to go down to DFW 2 weekends in a row?
2 weekends in a row. I'm trying to figure out if Jaron Kanik is going to lead the team in tackles or not get any defensive snaps or maybe something in between.
Well, it doesn't matter who they're playing, John. Faceless opponent, nameless opponent. That man is a football robot. I'm happy to crash with my sister the next 2 weekends, though. I don't think she's happy about it, but I'm very happy. So,
yeah, looking forward to it. Obviously, OU Texas game is one of a kind, and we'll talk about that a lot next week. But yeah, this weekend is fascinating because I don't know what TCU is, and I don't really know what Oklahoma is anymore. So pretty much anything could happen this weekend, and I would kind of believe it. So looking forward to seeing what the heck happens on Saturday. Oklahoma and TCU Saturday morning at 11 in Fort Worth. We'll all be there, making the trip down there. Amon G. Carter Stadium, home of the Armed Forces Bowl. Historic venue in college football history. Looking forward to seeing that action on Saturday down in Fort Worth. Should be a beautiful day. The high is like 80. I'm excited for that. So should be really, really nice college football Saturday on what is October 1st. So looking forward to that. Coming up, we'll talk a lot about that game, obviously. Here coming up in just a little bit. Do want to start, as we usually do, putting the finishing touches on last week's game before turning the page. Oklahoma, Kansas State, we talked about it, post-game. It was rough. It was a disaster, especially on the defensive side. Jalen Gabriel didn't play as well as he could. Defense obviously struggled a lot. But it was funny because I felt like we said numerous times in the post-game, specifically, it's not Dylan Gabriel's fault they lost this game, but he could have played a lot better. And then like 5 comments were like that we just blamed Dylan Gabriel. It was like, that's not what we said at all, actually. He just could play better. I think anybody who watched that game could say that. Doesn't mean it was his fault they lost, but anybody could say that who watched that game. That being all said, it was, like we said at the time, a team loss. A lot of areas need to improve if they're going to stack wins as the season goes on. Now that you guys have had time to watch it back, kind of let it wash over you the last few days, what are some thoughts on Kansas State, what happened on Saturday?
Well, let's start with Dylan Gabriel. Dylan said on Saturday night, I didn't play good enough to win. Dylan said on Tuesday night, I could have played a lot better. Let's be honest. Did he play good enough for Oklahoma to win? Let me check. Got my notes here. No, he didn't, because Oklahoma didn't win. He could have hit a couple of more passes. He could have hit that 4th down conversion. He could have done a lot of things that were better that helped Oklahoma win. I'm tired of this conversation. Dylan Gabriel did enough to help us win. He did enough to help you win. The final score of the game was Kansas State 41, Oklahoma 34. They did not win. He knows he could have played better. Everybody knows he could have played better. Nobody's piling on the kid. Nobody's rooting against the kid. It's a silly conversation, and it's a silly narrative to say, don't blame Dylan Gabriel. Everybody shares blame in this. Everybody. Now, is there more percentage of blame on the defense? Yes, 1,000% more blame on the defense for missing all those tackles, for not generating pass rush, for not getting off blocks, for not being physical at the point of attack, for getting run over by quarterbacks in 4th and short and 3rd and short situations where the pile, he would hit the sticks and lean forward for the first down. That happened 2 times. So there's a lot of areas that the defense could have played better, but you can't just say, well, he threw for 330 yards. He threw for 330 yards, including well over 100 in the 4th quarter when they were behind by 14 because the offense couldn't stay on the field. Everybody shares blame in this thing.
yeah, I think the defensive performance, going back and watching it, it's even worse. Like, Kansas State could have done anything they want. It didn't matter what the play call was. We could have gone in and called offense in the 4th quarter, and we could have drawn up plays in the huddle, and Kansas State would have executed, because that was a defense that over the course of 60 minutes lost all belief, all faith. The technique was out the window from like the 1st quarter on, the second they allowed that second touchdown drive. So I think that's why, and we'll get into it this week, you haven't heard a lot of like answers, things like that. It's leaning on the culture. It's leaning on hey, we've done this before. Brent Venables talked about, and he talked about splicing. Okay, here's a play that no one executed on Saturday. Now let's put up a play that everyone executed the exact same play call against Nebraska to show, like, yes, you can do this, because this is a team that showed all of the mental and emotional damage of the OU defenses that have been a joke the last decade.
Yeah, it's funny because it's like more as we peeled back the last few days and moved away from it, and not that initial reaction of having just seen it play out on Saturday. I feel like more so where it's just kind of, I don't know the right word. It's more, I could see, I believe that in terms of they lost. I mean, they got beat. They got beat by a good team. Braden Willis said on his podcast on the Prairie, which we've referenced before in this show, how a lot of the guys never played K-State before, and he felt like during the weekend preparation that he wasn't sure if K-State was getting enough respect from the guys who were new to Oklahoma going in. He wishes he had talked more about that and wish he had stepped up and been more vocal about that. And the reality is that Kansas State is before the season started, we all said is one of the best teams in this conference and a chance to be a real problem for OU in week 4. I think we had the question, what's the hardest game on the schedule? And Ryan and I both said Kansas State. So it totally makes sense that they got beat. And, the kind of the reaction of sky is falling, Brent Venables, is he the guy type of thing. It's the 4th game. To Garen Emig asked Brent after the game on Saturday, is this going to take some time? Brent didn't really want to hear that, but I think that's totally valid. It's going to take some time. I think that the idea, and I know I picked them to go undefeated this year, but the idea that, they were going to come in and it was going to be smooth sailing the entire way, not really realistic. You know what I mean? So this was a good team they played, and they got beat. And college football teams lose games. You know how many teams go undefeated each year? Not very many. 1, maybe 2. Teams lose games. It happens. So the sky is falling. I feel like as we've gotten away from it, it's been a little more. They got beat. They lost to a good team. And now how do you respond to it is really the bigger question. Kind of like Brent was saying after the game on Saturday night, and that's where we'll look ahead to TCU here coming up in just a little bit. So it was at Kansas State. We've seen this story a jillion times for OU. This early season loss, 4th, 5th, 6th game, somewhere in there, and OU. A lot of people write OU off. They plummet down the rankings, even though everything is still out in front of them. They did just absolutely tumble. They're 18 in the AP poll now. That's as big of a drop as I can ever remember. 12 spots in the AP poll. They're behind Baylor, and OSU in the conference. Kansas State snuck in at 25. I guess it goes without saying at this point that everything is still in front of what this team wants to do. I mean, the Big 12 is a mess. It's extremely deep. Anybody can beat anybody. And, it's 4 games in. There's still so much football to be played. I don't think that it's full-blown push the panic button. This team is going to be a disaster, 7-5, 6-6, at least not yet. Do you guys agree with that?
Well, I did get a question on Twitter today. When's the last time they lost 3 in a row? I'm like, wait a minute, they haven't even lost 2 in a row yet. What are you talking about? But yeah, it was 1998. They lost 5 straight. I think what you're seeing in the AP poll is an overcorrection for what was an overcorrection to begin with. There's a lot of voters right now who feel good about their poll saying, see, I told you Oklahoma wasn't any good. I told you this Brent Venables thing wasn't going to work. I knew it from the very beginning. I just ranked them high because they were 3-0 and they won on the road. That's the only reason I ranked them high. That's what people are doing right now. Now, they're not going to admit it. Voters are not going to admit it. I used to be one. We're not going to admit it. We're going to take this professional analytical approach. But the reason that Oklahoma fell so far in the poll is that overcorrection. Now, I knew it. I told you guys.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I expect a big response from them this week because, frankly, what we've seen and heard from the players, I know it's different. The message from Brent Venables, different from the position coaches, different behind the scenes. This sounds like the same old Oklahoma team. They played 3 good games, and then they got high on their own supply and got run over by a Kansas State team they didn't respect. And now you're hearing that they needed a wake-up call in week 4, all that stuff. This sounds like, hey, the Brent Venables talked about it, that culture doesn't happen overnight. There's a lot of guys who have been in that locker room for a long time and use these same excuses to, basically justify their dumb losses over the years. I think that Brent Venables has a little bit more ways to go to kind of stamp that out, and I think you're boring that out. You see that in the polls, that they've got a ways to go before they kind of stamp out that attitude and how people are going to view them nationally.
You know what I love though is Brent coming out saying the rat poison, which we heard on Monday night after the game, and it was brought up to him on Tuesday morning at the press conference. Not Monday night after the game, Monday night after practice. Sorry. And guys are like, we can't believe the media, we can't believe the hype, we can't believe the fans. Brent was like, rat poison, huh? That's an interesting term. He's not buying it. He's like, stop making excuses for why you sucked the other night. You sucked because you sucked. You didn't suck because somebody told you were 3-0 and number 6 in the country. That's impressive. That's an impressive stance. Like Nick Saban is the guy who gets the rat poison, flies the banner, right? He's the one that comes out and talks about it. Nick Saban's methods are tried and true. You cannot dispute what Nick Saban does. And yet here's Brent Venables saying, what is that supposed to mean? Rat poison. That has nothing to do with how we played on Saturday night. I love that approach from Brent Venables.
Yeah, it's exactly, because that's really the question that I think all OU fans are having. And this is a rough week, for OU fans because, like just what you're saying with the overcorrection, this is that the national media and the fans across the country who basically said that OU would shrivel into Nebraska land once Lincoln Riley left, they were wrong for a few weeks. And now they feel like they've been validated. And so and there's not anything that OU fans can really even say right now. You kind of just have to take it and hope that it turns around. But yeah, for Brent Venables to, he has not made one even remote excuse. He's been asked questions after the game. I think it was Barry Trammell asked him, why did K-State didn't move the ball against Tulane at all? What was the deal? And he kind of said they were much simpler last weekend, but he quickly moved past that. He's been very consistent in that we got thumped and we have to be better, and we'll find out if we are, basically. And it's also been very consistent on staying with what their approach is, not a full-blown panic overhaul. Said, hey, we strip it down to the studs every week anyway. We're going to do that again. Dylan Gabriel's going to continue to be myself, blah, blah, blah. So that's kind of been the theme of the entire week, in my opinion, been a lot of we're going to try and just do the same, but we're going to try and do it better, basically. And we'll see how that shakes out. But I don't know. I mean, do you guys feel like it was more of a mentality issue, or was it more just Kansas State's better? If they play again this week, would it be different? I guess is really the question. Or later in the year.
Ryan, didn't you say if they played 6 or 7 times, or if they played 10 times, Oklahoma would win 6 or 7? I think that's probably right. I think Oklahoma has better athletes. The program speaks for itself at some point. But when you're stuck in the trench with the guy across from you, are you going to win your assignment? Are you going to beat him that day, that play? And Oklahoma, too many times on Saturday night, did not do that. And that's what it came down to. I think Oklahoma is the better team. I don't think Oklahoma would have lost 17-10 to Tulane. Let me ask you a question. We prop Chris Kleiman up pretty high on this show and his staff. How do you lose at home 17-10 to Tulane and then go on the road and beat Oklahoma? The question is, or I guess the answer is, you overlooked Tulane. You didn't prepare for Tulane. You spent time all off season and all preseason on Oklahoma, and then you probably spent time during the week of Tulane prepping for Oklahoma. So I could see where you would drop that game if you didn't actually. I don't have any inside information here. I'm trying to draw conclusions and connect dots.
Right.
So if you're a K-State fan and you're watching this and you were in the meeting room and you know that they prepared just as hard for Tulane as they did for Oklahoma, then my apologies to you. If you're not, then you're probably with me that how did this happen? Well, let's connect these dots and see. They didn't prep for Tulane. They weren't prepared for Tulane like they were for Oklahoma.
And that's the week after that they obviously bludgeoned Missouri by 30. Yep. So it sandwiched. That Tulane loss is going to look weirder and weirder as we go, I think.
Well, I think it just speaks to, guys, I'm sorry, Adrian Martinez is not a good quarterback, even after a 5-touchdown performance. When you look at it against Tulane, Kansas State was 4 of 20 combined on 3rd and 4th downs. And that's an indictment on what Oklahoma did on 3rd and 4th downs, right? Kansas State got every major. I know the numbers were 8 of 17, 8 of 18 combined, but it felt like every time there was a key 3rd down, one that really mattered, not only did Kansas State get it, but Kansas State also got it and moved another 30 yards down the field. And that is a mentality. Brent Venables talked about that he saw a defense that was second-guessing themselves on their heels. Guess what? there's one team in the country or in this conference that you can't be playing defense on your heels or you will just get blown off the football, and it's that Kansas State team. There's no glitz, glamour, sex appeal about it. That is just, if you're on your heels, guess what? You're going to get picked up and driven 10 yards off the ball. So you had all that. That's what makes this so hard, I think, for Oklahoma when you look at it, because if you're a glass half empty guy, it's the defense is done. It's toasted. Nebraska was just awful. Forget about it. If you're glass half full, it's, oh my gosh, you lost by 7 points and you gave up a key kickoff return to Malik Knowles. You couldn't stop a nosebleed. You had all these penalties, and you feel like the penalties, the overthrows, all that is self-inflicted. But it's the same self-inflicted stuff we saw through the first 2 weeks. The false start thing was there in the first 2 weeks. Dylan Gabriel's missed a touchdown pass in 3 out of 4 games. Just like one of them, he didn't throw it to Jalil Farouk, and then Farouk and Lincoln, Stoops and North. Like, these things continue to happen. So I think at this point you have to bake in that Dylan Gabriel's probably going to miss a touchdown pass probably every other game, but it's been 3 out of 4 games so far.
You guys think confidence will be an issue now moving forward, at least on the defensive side, after what Kansas State did to them? And you got to imagine that after this whole off season with this staff, with Brent Venables, and we talked about it the week after the Nebraska game. I can't remember who exactly asked. It came up a few times to players and Brent and stuff of seeing the fruits of their labor. The first 3 weeks, the tackles for loss numbers and the sacks numbers, and obviously just points allowed, only allowed 30 total points the first 3 weeks. And then you have that happen on Saturday. Do you guys see that as, I mean, that would be hard to get back from that after everything you felt like it was different, and then that happens. You got to wonder if that's going to be the back of specifically the defensive side, the back of their minds going into a good TCU offense on Saturday, saying maybe we're still bad on this side of the ball.
Yeah, I think we've seen Monday night and Tuesday night, we've seen some body language from the players that would indicate that might happen, that there might be a confidence problem. I think what's more telling probably is that Kansas State exposed some things in Oklahoma's personnel / scheme / preparation, whatever it is, that you better believe TCU is going to look at on film and say, hey, we can do that too. What K-State did to them, we can do the exact same thing. Watch this. Here's how we're going to run our scheme. We're going to isolate this blocker. We're going to, we're going to bring this guy in the gap. We're going to influence this tackler, defensive lineman, see what happens, because they're susceptible to that, whether it be X, Y, Z, whatever it is. And the thing about that is everybody from this point forward is now going to pounce on that, a weakness, a perceived weakness, blood in the water. What Kansas State did and some of the execution that they did in short yardage specifically, or on third down specifically, situational. This team, or this conference, this Big 12 conference, has evolved into a more physical, bigger, stronger offensive lineman. Certainly a lot of experienced offensive linemen on Oklahoma's schedule that they're going to be facing. All those guys are going to say, Baylor, Oklahoma State, TCU, West Virginia, they're all going to look at it and they're all going to say, we can do exactly what they did, or at least assimilate it and try to replicate what they did. So, Oklahoma's confidence problem is real, because that blood in the water, everybody's going to start sniffing around it, and other teams are going to try and expose them.
Yeah, it'll be interesting, because that's something that was a storyline through the spring and the summer, right? Is that you inherited a defense, this defensive staff that was totally devoid of confidence, it felt like, in a lot of spots, and from guys like Billy Bowman, Key Lawrence, stuff like that. Like, rebuilding confidence was something that staff immediately did in them. So how quickly can they get that thing back up and running? I thought it was – we mentioned that example that Brent Venables said of, like, cutting in, hey, you've done this play well before, you just didn't do it on Saturday, making that cut. But also, Ethan Downs had some really interesting stuff to say. I think he's always really insightful when he comes and talks about, like, he likened it to when you're a kid and you get all these life lessons that your parents tell you over and over and over again, and you kind of gloss over and you're like, yeah, Dad, whatever. And then you have to go out there and make that mistake at school, or you have to make that mistake, right? And so now that you've made that mistake, you sit up and go, maybe there's something to this. And then you sink that in and rebuild that again. And so he had that. He had a metaphor about testing that'll be on AllSooners.com here Thursday morning that I would invite you to go work with that. It shows you the defense is working through some stuff, and stuff mentally, as well as just the physical nature of, they're not as good as the Clemson defense talent-wise. physically, like it's not the personnel that Brent Venables would have recruited in there as far as like how beefy they are, stuff like that. So they're all dealing with playing heavier weights, stuff like that. They're gonna have to work through all of that throughout the season.
Gonna be interesting. Very looking forward to seeing what happens on Saturday because I don't know. I don't know what I want to do with my game pick this week. I'm gonna think about it because it's gonna be. I don't know what to expect on Saturday. Looking forward to it though. OU and TCU. One last little bit of housekeeping before we get into a full game preview. Brent Venables did say yesterday that the plan as of now is to redshirt Kobe McKenzie and Kip Lewis, a couple of those highly touted freshman linebackers. Now, this is pretty expected, but also it came up because the linebackers are crazy thin. I mean, you have Hoover and I talked about it on the press conference wrap yesterday. You have Stutzman and Deshaun White and David Hicks, these guys who OU fans know very well. Those are your guys, but after that, it's kind of just an abyss. And if those three guys aren't working out, and David Hicks didn't play particularly well, obviously on Saturday, the whole defense didn't, but you don't really have anywhere else to turn. And so these young guys being redshirted kind of it lets you know where Brent Venables feels like those guys are right now in their development. Also just reinforces that Stutzman, White, Hicks, like they have to make it work. They don't really have any other options essentially. So it's gonna be interesting to see how that plays out going forward because we all thought linebackers would be a strength, and it was I think in the early part, but it was not on Saturday certainly. So seeing how that kind of evolves is going to be worth keeping an eye on.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think Shane Witter has a chance to maybe an opening to do something. You saw multiple times on Saturday night that guys like Deshaun White, David Hicks were taking bad angles. One of the reasons you take bad angles is because your feet are stuck in the mud. One of the reasons your feet are stuck in the mud is because you're so tired from playing so many snaps. They faced 86 snaps, I think, on Saturday, and those guys played the vast majority of defensive snaps. So you're taking bad angles because you're stuck in place because your legs are so tired because you've played so many snaps. Shane Witter might have an opportunity to play more. I don't get why Jaren Kanak didn't play more. There's got to be a reason. Maybe the reason is he has no idea what he's doing, as Brent Venables said in Lincoln, Nebraska, right? That's got to have something to do with it. But at some point, if your starting backers are all gassed and you're still facing the same scheme, the running quarterback or the read option or the inside zone that they're running, and it's not working, at some point you got to get the backups in there. So I'll be interested to see. I heard earlier in the week that Justin Harrington has moved from cheetah to safety. So he's back at playing safety, and they're kind of evaluating the value of the cheetah position. In other words, Deshaun White may be moving back to a full-time Sam linebacker, backed up by Jaren Kanak. Might be more of a nickel versus Sam as opposed to a hybrid cheetah position. That's going to be interesting to watch as this thing evolves. But yeah, man, why did they play so great? And numbers-wise, don't get me wrong, I think Hicks had 15 tackles, and I think Deshaun White had 10, if I'm not mistaken. Numbers-wise, they were productive, but that's because they faced so many plays, and they were hanging on to the ball carrier at the end of the play as opposed to getting up and making the tackle like they did the week before at Nebraska.
Yeah, it's an interesting conversation because, like, on one hand, a guy like Danny Stutzman, remember, he was a rotational player last year who had fought through an injury. This was start number 4 for Danny Stutzman. So you can understand how a guy like that gets run over by a Kansas State defense. David Hicks, Deshaun White, like it's put up or shut up time for those guys. And that's coming off of Deshaun White having the best half of football he's played at Oklahoma and Lincoln up until the targeting play.
Yep.
Like that is what is so frustrating for Oklahoma fans, I think, is that you thought, okay, you're starting to see some signs of development from kind of the older guys, and then it's 2 steps forward, 30 yards back.
Yeah, I don't know. It keeps going back. I don't know. That game on Saturday was just so surprising, at least to me. It really felt like it came mostly out of nowhere. So we'll see how they bounce back on Saturday. That's what we're going to talk about next. Took a timeout. We'll come back, break it down. Oklahoma, TCU on Saturday in Fort Worth. What are we expecting to happen? What does Oklahoma need to do to win the game? All that good stuff coming up next on the AllSooners Podcast. On Twitter, you can follow AllSooners at @all_Sooners. Ryan is at _Ryan Chapman. Hooves at John E. Hoover. I'm at Josh M. Callaway. Our website is AllSooners.com. We are a Fan Nation affiliate, part of the Sports Illustrated Network. All right, segment 2 on this Wednesday afternoon. Oklahoma and TCU this weekend in Fort Worth. We'll break it down, what we're looking forward to, and what we expect to see happen on Saturday with the Sooners and the Frogs. TCU is 3-0 to start the season, start the Sonny Dykes era. They haven't played a Big 12 game yet. Their schedule hasn't been incredible, but they did go into Dallas and beat SMU on Saturday. The return of Sonny Dykes, going back to his old stomping grounds. And, Brent Venables talked about this yesterday, but their offense, again, they haven't played a murderer's row by any stretch. Their offense has been very good. They're top 10 in scoring offense and total offense. Can I interest you in that in the first 3 weeks of the season? So, it's early. And, like I said, they haven't played amazing opponents just so far, but top 10 is top 10, 3 weeks into the season, 3 games in for them. So we'll see what Oklahoma's got. It's another challenge for this defense to try and bounce back. Some initial thoughts on TCU and what we're going to see on Saturday.
I'm going to read some stats to you guys that will put you to sleep very quickly. Are you ready? TCU is 9th in the country in points per game, 50th in points allowed. First downs per game, they're 64th. First downs allowed, they're 72nd. They've run the football well, 21st in the country. They've also stopped the run, 29th in the country in rushing defense. Passing yards per game, they're 27th. Passing yards allowed, they're 107th. Okay. Having said all that, I got total offense. Total offense per game, they're 9th in the nation. That's pretty good. 68th on defense. Now, having said all that, why do I bring that up? Their schedule is hot garbage, on fire, smoldering for months. They played Colorado. Colorado, guys, might be the worst Power 5 school, Power 5 program right now, or at least this season, Power 5 team in the country.
They're down there.
They are way down there. They're not competitive, and they were competitive with TCU for a half. Chandler Morris was the quarterback. He was having a hard time getting first downs. They were having a hard time moving the football. And, eventually Max Duggan came in. There was an injury. Chandler Morris, hope he's okay. Heard today that he has been elevated and he might be available for Saturday against Oklahoma. That's going to be fun. But this was Colorado. Colorado's terrible. Then they played FCS Tarleton State. Tarleton is no good. That is not a game. Then they go across town and they play SMU, and they have to make plays at the end of the game to hold on to win 42-34. To win by 8 points against SMU. Now, they've lost recently to SMU, so that's a step up. But this is something that everything, when we say TCU is good at this or TCU is not good at that, everything begins with their schedule, and they haven't played anybody. SMU is the only team that they've played with a pulse, and they had to survive that one, and they had to pull away at the end from Colorado. So I'm not impressed with their schedule at all.
Yeah, Josh, you're going to be on the field. For you, my friend, beware of the weird TCU Horned Frog train whistle thing, because I think that bad boy will be humming all game long. I'm expecting a shootout. I don't know if it'll be a 50-50 shootout. I don't know if it'll be Oklahoma wins this game. They win this game what feels kind of comfortably by 2 scores, and it's still 50-35, something like that. But points are the avenue for both of these teams, right? Oklahoma's offense has been humming despite the fact that they go through these entire lulls, big stretches. TCU, we talk about, okay, what just killed Oklahoma? Quarterback run game. Hello, 2019 Max Duggan, the same Max Duggan, freshman Max Duggan, ran for over 100 yards against the Oklahoma defense. So he's got that in him. Hasn't hit Oklahoma for that consistently. I think it was about 30 yards and like 19 yards. So it's not been like a Max Duggan wheels are a problem consistently, but he's shown he can do that. Quentin Johnson, he's a bigger bodied guy than Malik Knowles, and Oklahoma did not come close to making a play on a football. Secondary wise, Kendre Miller, he's a running back that, while not Zach Evans, is still incredibly talented, incredibly productive. Don't know how good anything of TCU's really is, other than like we know those skill position players are good because we've seen them for a couple of years. So for an Oklahoma defense that did literally nothing right on Saturday, it's going to need a big response for that defensive line. But that secondary, it was the line that got run over against Kansas State. There's a very real possibility that if the secondary is not up for it, the secondary will be chasing guys all day long, making things, again, easy on Max Duggan, who if he's the one that's having to fit stuff into tight windows, stuff like that, you're going to win the football game. The problem is Oklahoma against K-State didn't make Adrian Martinez fit any windows, and that receiving core has the potential to do the same thing to him this weekend if they're not careful.
I really like Darius Davis. I watched him against Colorado. Kid's unbelievable. He's electric. And Brent Venables said, number 11, he'll be the fastest player we face all year. He is incredible. He is dynamic. He might be the best player on the field Saturday. He leads the team in receptions. He's also the kickoff man and the punt man. So I look forward to seeing that kid play. He's special. Something that you mentioned, Ryan, the running game with Kendre Miller. He's only been thrown for a loss this year one time for 2 yards, 38 carries in 3 games. So he's averaging about, 83 yards a game. They haven't exploited his talents yet. I think he's very good. I think he might be one of the top running backs, top 3 or 4 running backs in the Big 12 this year. They just haven't had a call to use him yet because they've played such a soft schedule. So he's a guy that could carry the mail. He's a guy that could get 25 carries and really, grind down the clock, tire out the Oklahoma defense. We've talked a million times already this season about 1-minute possessions for the OU offense, and there's the defense back on the field. It's funny. It's whether it's a 3-and-out or a touchdown drive, it's like somewhere between 50 seconds and 1:20. The Oklahoma offense is averaging on their possessions. So if they get the ball going with Kendre Miller in the run game, and then of course Max Duggan, the quarterback you mentioned, or if Chandler Morris comes back and they get the running game going with those guys, try to do some of the things that K-State did with Adrian Martinez, that could be a really long day for the Oklahoma defense.
It feels like we're going to see some points on Saturday. I'm not sure what the over-under is set at, but I would lean the over, depending on what it is. TCU does
61.5.
Skill.
61.5 was the over-under. I looked it up yesterday.
Yeah, I'd like the over on that. That's where I would lean right now. Because TCU, like you guys were saying, they have skill on the outside. Max Duggan has played really well so far, or Chandler Morris, whoever it is. We know Chandler Morris can play a little bit, and Max Duggan can play a little bit as well. We've seen a lot of him. He's been at TCU for, I think, 12 years. So they're going to move the ball. I think they're going to put up some points.
I just looked it up. 68.5. It's moved up.
Oh, wow. That's a big jump.
That's a huge jump in the past 24 hours, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people think what I'm thinking. That's kind of where I would land. Now it's a little more 50-50. I still think it has got a good shot to go over that, though. I mean, we're going to see up and down. TCU's got skill on the outside, and we'll see. And, I can't help but wonder, too, and we talked about this a lot in the post-game show on Saturday after the Kansas State game. Oklahoma says that they know they're going to get everybody's best shot, and they know they're going to get the Game 7, from their opponent, all that stuff. They say that, but do they actually practice that when it comes to game day? That was a question that we had on Saturday because it didn't seem like it with Kansas State. Similar thing goes for TCU here. For all the reasons that we said, they haven't played anybody. They let Colorado hang around with them. They let SMU hang around with them. And if you guys remember last year, Oklahoma destroyed TCU last year when they came to Norman. That was Caleb Williams' first start, and he had a zillion touchdowns, and it was ugly. They played him by like 30 or whatever it was. And so, you wonder, are they going to come in off a loss? You think that would help, but you hope that they would come in with that attitude and that edge of this game is losable, because if they don't, you could find yourself in another hole, and good luck from there. And then you're flipping a coin, because that's been a big talking point this week too, is getting off to a better start. We talked about that a little bit on Saturday night as well. 14-0 against Kansas State, 7-0 against Nebraska. They didn't score until almost halftime against Kent State. You can't do that every week, so they need to get off to a better start. The way TCU can score, that's going to put you in a tough spot. So I think, them coming in with the right mindset of this game is losable from the jump is going to be really important, because if they come in a little lackadaisical from the start, they could find themselves in another hole on the road, and good luck from there. Because TCU, while it's not Memorial Stadium in Nebraska, it's not Neyland or something, those fans are going to be juiced up for this. They're 3-0. Oklahoma's coming to town. You get everybody's best home atmosphere when you go on the road. That's the best they got when Oklahoma goes in there. So I imagine the fans will be into it, and we'll see what happens. I mean, a lot of OU fans will make the trip down there. I don't doubt that. It's just 3 hours down the road. But, getting off to a good start and having the right mindset, it feels is really important if Oklahoma wants to, get out of there with a back in the win column.
Yeah, you guys correct me if I'm wrong, but I seem to remember that last year's game, 52-31 was the final score.
I remember
this was after the Texas game. Oklahoma jumped out to a big third quarter lead, and then kind of TCU scored 17 in the third and fourth quarters. Okay, they won comfortably. They won very comfortably, even though it was 52-31. I could see that score again this year, 52-31, with Oklahoma being the team that piles on in the fourth quarter and kind of pulls away. Like it's a competitive game, but the score ends up the same. Does that make sense? Like less? Yeah. Okay. So I could see that happening this year, where Oklahoma, flexes its muscles a little bit, better schedule, better teams, better talent, better personnel. But the way the game unfolds, the Sooners need, because it's a competitive game, they need to make plays in the fourth quarter. And that's the thing. Have they been forced to make plays in the fourth quarter of a game yet this year? No. I mean, they have, and it was Kansas State, and it didn't work out. And so that would make me concerned that if it's a close game, if it's 35-all going into the fourth quarter or something like that, 28-0 or 28-28, what happens then? This team hasn't really been pushed, tested, asked to respond in the fourth quarter. The one time they failed.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. You talk about kind of the mentality, Josh. We heard from Jalil Farouk, who said that they came into this season with this like underdog mentality of wanting to show everyone wrong, basically, from the stuff they'd heard all offseason. Sounds like they got over that Nebraska hurdle, blew him out. Colin Cowherd said that he's always been in Oklahoma, someone to back up the Oklahoma fans, all that stuff. And the team said, the team said, we've done it. We played 3 games against bad teams, and we've proven to everyone that it doesn't matter that Lincoln Riley's not here anymore. It sounds like, based off like that and Key Lawrence saying they have a chip on their shoulder now, stuff like that, somehow, some way, it sounds like that became a thing. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. And another thing, too, I don't know if this ties in directly to mentality, but so much has been made about the pre-snap penalties, stuff like that. Oklahoma has shown they can play a clean game on the offensive line. They did it in Lincoln in the loudest atmosphere they'll be in all year long. Now they're going on the road. Right. Is it something that they are locked in on? We'll have to see. But it'll also be interesting. Andrew Raym mentioned, I was asking him, hey, what's the difference between this TCU defense and what you saw out of TCU last year? And he dropped the buzzwords. It's more of a drop 8 defense. So this is going to be another test, right? Kent State did that. The offensive line did not play well, and Jeff Lebby said, I was too stubborn trying to establish the run. We knew that coming in, right? If Jeff Lebby sees a drop 8 defense, he's going to run the football. Okay, now that you have Wanya Morris back, now that you have that confidence, this is an interior offensive line that was still getting split a little bit against K-State, a really good defensive front, but they found ways to be very effective on the ground, 6.5 yards a carry. Can Oklahoma tighten that up and not shoot themselves in the foot early, both by A, false starts, things like that, but B, they need to come out on the first 2 or 3 drives, and they need to look dominant up front, knowing that Jeff Lebby's going to run the football. They don't need to have to take 2 quarters to ease into the game where Jeff Lebby has to throw to open up the run game. This should be a scenario where that mentality, they should be able to run over TCU early because of the look they're going to get from the defense.
Who referenced it earlier, and Ryan, you just kind of did a little bit there. What have you guys thought of the players this week? And who wasn't there last night talking to the players, but on Monday night and then last night we got Dillon Gabriel and a couple others. How have you guys felt that this has been? It's felt weird for me. Like, it hasn't been full-blown, we're going to right this wrong. I mean, there's clearly a disgust there. Especially, I remember Deshaun White on Monday night was really, he almost you could just see. He was like squirming almost talking about the game. And I think they're a little embarrassed. So I don't know what that translates to on Saturday. I really don't, because coming into the year and each week of the season, you felt like there was, like Ryan was saying, that prove everybody wrong mentality and stuff like that. Remember the week of the first game, the UTEP game here in Stutzman, the way he talked about just the excitement to play, and it was like, oh, these guys are ready. This week not that they're not ready, but this week it was more of they're I think I think they're bummed almost with what happened on Saturday. Now, again, I don't know how that translates when they play again. It may bring out the best of them, or maybe they, like we were talking about earlier, they lack some confidence and that hurts them. I don't really know. I don't know how that's going to translate. I'm interested to see that.
Yeah, body language is big. I'm a big believer in your body language projecting how you perform, how you act, how you interact with other people. And the body language Saturday night, the body language Monday night and Tuesday night, from what I saw in the videos you guys sent, was not great. And frankly, I got to be honest. I think we all have a great appreciation for the man that Brent Venables is. I thought Brent was going to come in on Tuesday morning and really project this energetic, hey guys, what's up? Glad to be here. Let's talk TCU. Can't wait. This is going to be awesome. This team's ready to play. Team 128. He didn't do any of that. And if he's not doing that with the media in front of all the cameras and microphones, what's he doing behind closed doors with his team? And are they picking up on that kind of downward kind of vibe that Brent, frankly, projected on Tuesday? He was very reserved and muted and with not withdrawn. That's probably not a good word, but very, very, I don't know, cautious with his commentary. I don't know how to sum it up. I don't have enough words in my vocabulary, but his body language projected to me that he was really down, really kind of beaten down a little bit, or hadn't slept or something. And so what I'm wondering is, when you're a player, you're Ethan Downs or you're Dillon Gabriel, whoever, you come in, you sit in the meeting room with the team, and coach is up there and has this low energy and low voice, and we got to get better at this, and we got to get better at that, and everything's fine, and I believe in you guys. I expected more energy. I expected more positivity. So maybe that's what we're seeing, is a little bit of that trickle down from Brent Venables to the players. And I will add this. My man Dave Sittler, when he retired as columnist at the Tulsa World, the best advice he gave me was, as the new columnist at the Tulsa World, don't read the comments section. Don't read the replies. You will get eaten up with negativity, and you will be beaten down, and you will, just ignore it. Just just pretend like it's not there. And the 4 years I was the columnist there, my wife would bring me stuff and say, look what this guy said. Look what this person said. Look what this woman said. And I'd be like, I don't want to see it. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to know it. That affects my negativity. And so when I talk to Deshaun White on Monday, I saw someone who was really agitated. And I was like, did he read everybody's, stories that we wrote and watch the podcasts and the videos that we did? Or did he get on social media and have, get the experience of everybody telling him how terrible he was, and Deshaun White needs to be replaced, and Deshaun White can't play dead, and all this stuff, all these social media comments? That's one of the drawbacks of social media, is these players in this generation, younger players, get on social media and get that immediate feedback, and they immediately get, as I said, Deshaun White to me looked agitated to have to be there and answer those questions. So hopefully, the team, the players, they don't take it too personally. People love their OU football. I think that's what generations of OU fans have projected, and now we see the good, and we see, obviously, when Saturday night happens, we're seeing the bad as well.
Yeah, it's interesting you had that feeling coming out of the Venables presser, because I thought, while the words are different, right? Because coming off a loss, searching for answers. If you remember UTEP week, the very first Brent Venables press conference, he was very muted, very quiet. You had gone over and asked, is he okay?
Yeah.
And that's how he's been. There have been moments, the Nebraska press conference, he was that way until he was asked about OU Nebraska memories, and then that's when he got animated. But for the most part, when we've seen Brent Venables on Saturday night after the game, I thought he still had the same fire and same energy that he had the first 3 games for a win. He was just frustrated. It was an annoyance, a frustration, an anger, as opposed to happiness and all that stuff.
He used the word pissed, and he's totally
right. And so I don't think I saw anything different in Brent Venables other than just he's answering questions after a loss. But when you go player to player, Key Lawrence to me projected confidence. Deshaun White felt like he would have rather been anywhere else. Jalil Farouk felt like he would have rather been anywhere else than talking to us coming off a loss. Andrew Rame projected confidence to me. Ethan Downs wasn't a confidence or 2 up, 2 down, but just an understanding of, we took our lumps, now we got to respond from it. So I think that's kind of indicative of the whole performance was up and down. If you're watching on the YouTube, you saw, the roller coaster. Like there were good and bad, kind of littered all across the field, except for maybe the defense, which was mostly bad, except for that moment where they had the 3 straight stops and then where they got to stop coming out of the half. I think that because of how that game went, everyone's kind of responding differently. It's been fascinating to see.
Really feels like to me, and maybe this is overstating, maybe this is putting too much on it, but it feels like to me this game is going to really, the trajectory of the season, it really maybe hinges on this game. If they come back, put out a good effort, and win, sky's the limit again. I mean, Big 12 title and all that stuff is still obviously totally on the table. If they go play another stinker, they lose 2 in a row going into the Texas game, you might start to lose guys a little bit. And so it's going to be – this is a big game, obviously. Like I said, I think the trajectory of this season might really – we might circle the TCU game as the point where it really went off the rails or the point where they kind of start to ascend, when we get to the end of the year. So we'll see. Big game on Saturday. Final thoughts on this game. Keys for Oklahoma. What do they got to do to win? And what are some thoughts? You don't have to give your game pick yet, obviously, but what are some thoughts on what's going to happen on Saturday? What does Oklahoma have to do if they want to get out of there?
Similar to last week, Malik Knowles busted that 58-yard kickoff return that saved or pumped some momentum back into Kansas State. Oklahoma never really got it back after that. This is a situation where Darius Davis is a fantastic return man. You give him a crack, and he's going to take it to the house. So you've got to be almost perfect on kickoff returns. Either kick the thing out of the end zone or do something other than kick it to him at the goal line or the 5 or whatever. That would be a nightmare scenario. You don't want to have to cover that guy. Other than that, I think Oklahoma needs to play the quarterback, get off their blocks on the pass rush, stop leaning on guys. It's like, and we saw this with Alex Grinch with the speed D when they were too small to overpower people. You saw guys just go in and lean on a blocker. Okay, he's going to block me. Well, I'm going to impact him, and I couldn't drive him back, so I'll just kind of lean here for a minute while the play goes on. Maybe I'll get my hand up and bat a pass. No, that's not how you do it. You got to get your hands on that guy. Push, pull, shove him, knock him back, do a swim move, whatever you got in your arsenal. Oklahoma defensive front needs to get off the blocks better, especially against a team that can carry the football like TCU.
Yeah, I think defensively, on top of all that, which I totally agree with, they need to make Max Duggan be Max Duggan, right? You didn't see that against Adrian Martinez. Like we said, they totally abandoned their rushing lanes and let a guy like Adrian Martinez tuck the ball, go, play with confidence. Adrian Martinez was not fitting balls into tight windows. He had wide open tight ends over the middle of the field or underneath balls to Malik Knowles and Phillip Brooks. And you didn't tackle, right? So you need to say, okay, if Max Duggan's going to beat us, he needs to deliver a perfect 60-yard ball over the top. He needs to fit it between a linebacker and a safety coming down over the middle of the field. You've got to take away those windows, tackle, and put them in those situations where they have to make great plays as opposed to just kind of being the game manager, the modern game manager for the team until they can, like, Max Duggan can tuck the ball and run. You know what I mean? Like, so just make those guys actually play the quarterback position at a high level as opposed to if I just get it to Quentin Johnson out here on a 5-yard out and he makes 2 guys miss, then that's a 20-yard pass play where I actually threw the ball 3 yards down the field.
Martinez was averaging 101 yards per game passing. I guess Oklahoma has 240. Yeah, and dropped a 150 in rushing. Like, the guy's not that good. And he admitted, he said that's the best game I've ever played. Yeah, well, congratulations.
Yeah, not the first time we've heard that about the Oklahoma defense and an opposing quarterback coming in.
1,000% correct.
Gonna be fun. Looking forward to it. Oklahoma TCU on Saturday morning. All right, say one last time out. We'll come back. We will give you a big recruiting update today. We also will talk a little bit about the Big 12, which is looking crazy deep all of a sudden out of nowhere. And we'll talk a little about Sooners in the NFL. Another big weekend for Jalen Hurts. We'll talk about that next on the AllSooners Podcast. Final segment of the AllSooners Podcast, episode 146. Send you on your merry way into your Week 5 weekend. Big recruiting day for Oklahoma today. Now, the timing of this is unfortunate for us. We record our podcast. It's 1 o'clock right now. David Hicks, the number 1 defensive lineman in the 23 class from Katy, Texas, He's committing today at 3:30. So by the time you listen to this, he will almost surely have already decided one way or another. So we have to keep it kind of broad in our conversation here. But the fact of the matter is, David Hicks is really, really, really good. We talked about him before. Oklahoma's been chasing him. They made a lot of headway on him in the summer, Champion Barbecue, stuff like that. Number one defensive lineman, like I said, number 12 player or number 9 player in the 247 Sports Composite, number 1 player in the state of Texas. He's a beast. You watch his tape. He just pushes people around. He just wreaks havoc. He's what you would think the number 1 defensive lineman would look like. He dominates, flat out dominates in Texas high school football. So huge deal you can get him. I think it's between pretty much OU and A&M. He's got 7 finalists. Ryan can speak on it better than me. But I think it's pretty much either going to be the Sooners or the Aggies, and we'll see what happens. But obviously a massive deal if Oklahoma can get him.
So if Hicks commits to Oklahoma, Oklahoma's class ranking, according to 24/7 Sports, I dug this up this morning, they're going to climb from number 6 currently, which is really good, to number 2 in the country. Number 2. They'll have the number 2 class if they land Hicks. And that's assuming they don't land anybody else. Of course, they're going to land additional talent. Hicks is a. I'm hesitant to say this because I'm going to give you some names that people are going to be mad at me for, but it is what it is. It's recruiting, and it's a roll of the dice. Okay, so I'll say it this way first: Hicks is a program-changing, culture-changing type of talent. The number 1 defensive tackle in the country. Who doesn't want the number 1 defensive tackle in the country? Oklahoma needs to land a guy like this. It's been years since they've gotten one of these. Lately, they've all gone to A&M and Alabama and Georgia. But that's why I get the sense that he's going to go to A&M. Although if you look at everybody's projections and crystal balls and futurecast and all that, everybody thinks he's going to Oklahoma. That would be huge for Oklahoma. I don't know what kind of NIL package Oklahoma has available for him that compares to what Texas A&M is apparently allegedly doing. But some of the names that come up when you look at the best players in the recruiting rankings era, guys, this is unbelievable. Adrian Peterson is number 1. Guess who's number 2? We've said this before. Rhett Bomar. Sorry, Rhett Bomar's number 2. Guess who's number 3? Caleb Williams. See where I'm going with this? In the age of the transfer portal, in the age of recruiting rankings, getting David Hicks would be huge, but only if he projects out to a 3-year starter and a 3-year player and an college All-American and stuff like that. DeMarcus Granger's on this list. Jaden Hazelwood's on this list. R.J. Washington's on this list. Spencer Rattler's on this list. Jeremy Calhoun's on this list of top 10 ranked Oklahoma recruits. So temper your expectations, even if Oklahoma gets him, even if Oklahoma lands him. Throw a big party, have a big day, celebrate, but realize that just because you get a commit from the best player at his position in the country, just because he's a 5-star, just because he's the best player coming in that class, whatever, he's a historically ranked player, doesn't mean that he's going to be the next Tommy Harris. You hope for it, and you might pray for it, but doesn't mean it's going to happen. So I hate to rain on everybody's parade. I am the wet towel in recruiting rankings, but that's just the way it is.
I was going to say the flip side of that is that Joe McCoy, Tommy Harris, those guys are also in that list. And while no one's a guarantee, right? Recruiting is an inexact science, but this is why class rankings matter and stars matter and things like that. It's because even people that are the people that make the recruiting rankings, they'll tell you it's not an exact science, but what is Alabama, Georgia, and then recently Texas A&M, which A&M still has 2 or 3 more years of recruiting like they recruited the last 2 years to enter the stratosphere. If you continue to stack those stars on each other, okay, if one of those guys doesn't pan out, guess what? You've got 3 other ones who do pan out and no one thinks about it, which is why David Hicks is a massive, massive recruiting win if it goes that way for Oklahoma. Yep. You had one of these guys in Gabriel Brownlow-Dindy last year, but due to the staffing changes, all that stuff, didn't pan out. He signs with A&M. You got to get him on campus, but when you look at it, this is like the crown jewel, all that, whatever you want to call the cherry on top, but it's not the only hope for Oklahoma. When you look at who they have recruited right now, PJ Adebore, a guy that's earned a 5th star in the 247 composite edge rusher. You've got a Colton Vasek. You've got a Derek LeBlanc. Like, that is what you have to do. And if you go into, at 11, we post our preview. Like, you go in and look through the names. Okay, then you've got, in the secondary, Makari Vickers and Jacoby Johnson and Josiah Wagner, all high 4-star. On 3 may have them a little bit different, maybe a little higher, stuff like that. You have to stack all those guys together. That way, okay, not everyone's going to pan out. You're going to have some surprises. If your surprises come from 4 stars, then your surprises are guys that you thought would be good players that end up being first-round draft picks, right? The guys that don't pan out, okay, well, guess what? You've got another 5-star edge rusher in this class in PJ Adewore if it's not David Hicks. So that is what's so important, and I think that you should always be celebrating a guy the caliber of this, because that's what Oklahoma's lacked. When you've looked at Oklahoma in the college football playoff, there's not any Quentin Nelsons, right? There's not any Cleveland Farrells, guys like that are lining up to rush opposing passers. You've had those guys on offense, the equivalent of those guys. You've never been close to having guys that have that caliber on defense, much less 11 of them.
Oklahoma can't win a national championship without guys like David Hicks. I'm just saying that right now. Adebore, all those guys that you mentioned, Colton Vasek is another one. Those are special, as I said, program-changing, culture-changing talents. Who's been getting them all lately? Alabama, obviously. Clemson, obviously. And now Texas A&M's getting them. I don't see any national championships coming out of College Station lately. Georgia, obviously, got a bunch of them. Well, you're right. Yeah. So you cannot all those programs, except for A&M at this point, have won national championships and have done so in dominating fashion. They've owned the line of scrimmage. You have to get this guy if you have a design on winning the national championship. If Oklahoma's ever going to win a national title, it's going to be in the SEC, and it's going to be with players like David Hicks.
Big time. I mean, it's huge get. We talked about him in the summer whenever it was rumored that they were making a big push for him. So, he's been on our radar here for a while. So he makes a decision today at 3:30. Again, if you're listening to this or watching YouTube, it's almost certainly after he's already announced. So go to AllSooners.com to read about his decision one way or another, watch some tape on him, and see what Oklahoma is getting, or I guess missed out on, depending on how that goes at 3:30 today. Going to be interesting. We're going to be glued in, that's for sure. He's coming on ESPN2, which you don't get that very often. So I'll let you know where he is as far as stature. Going to be interesting. Going to be fun. Going to be a big day on OU Twitter one way or another here coming up in just a couple hours from now. Looking at the Big 12, we talked about last week was another big week for the conference, and they passed the test again. This conference is sneaky, really deep. I don't know how this happened all of a sudden, but Kansas beat Duke, so they're 4-0. West Virginia went into Blacksburg and hammered Virginia Tech. I still think they're probably the worst team in the conference, but, I mean, you go into Blacksburg and just hammer Virginia Tech when you're the worst team in the conference. That's pretty good for your league. Baylor beats Iowa State in Ames. TCU, like we said earlier, beat SMU in Dallas. Right now, it feels like all 10 teams can beat any of the other 9. Like, it is wide open. Like, looking at the slate this weekend, all 5 games are coin flips to me. OU, TCU, Texas Tech, Kansas State, Oklahoma State, Baylor, Iowa State, Kansas, West Virginia, Texas. Those all could go either way. This conference is wide open right now. It's going to be a mess by the time we get to December.
All 5 games last week, Josh, were 1-score games. All 5 Big 12 games were 1-score games. That could happen again this week. That could happen every week once they get into conference play every week. So I'm with you. I've said it before. I've said it on my radio show a number of times. Who's the best team in this conference? We don't know. Who's the worst team in this conference? We don't know. What we see are a bunch of 3s and 4s and 5s and 6s. Who's the third best? Well, it's kind of a 3-way tie, right? Or a 4-way tie. West Virginia, I'm agreeing with you that they're probably 10th. I think I had them 10th in my power rankings this week. They should have beaten Pittsburgh in the season opener. They should have beaten Pittsburgh. Ball goes through a guy's hand as return for a pick 6. Otherwise, they have a real shot to win that game at the end. That's your 10th worst team. This conference is pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, because lots of that too is okay. So Pitt played Kansas, Virginia Tech, and then a scrub. West Virginia has, right. Kansas, who's 4-0, and you wouldn't be taking that away from them anyway. But it's not like they played 3 FCS schools and then snuck by one Big 12 game, right? It's you go in, you beat West Virginia, on the road. Tennessee Tech, congrats, won a cookie. But a Houston team, a Duke team, like those are 3 legitimate opponents that Kansas has played and won. We'll find out a lot about OSU, who has just looked in cruise control through their non-conference right this week as they head down to Waco. You have a Baylor team that dropped on to BYU and responds. You had Iowa State that, while they looked a step below Baylor, looked frisky, right, as far as a team that outside of Xavier Hutchinson and Will McDonald has had to replace basically everybody else as far as the major contributors from last year. Like, I don't know where you go with this conference other than buckle up. And if you're Oklahoma, you can't have any of that not believing the Game 7 anyone can beat you thing. If that happens again and again and again, Oklahoma's going to look up and be 8-4 at the end of the year.
Yeah, when the season started, and obviously we talked about the schedule, and I was saying how I love the way the schedule lined up because all the good Big 12 teams, in theory, are at home. Well, I mean, Texas Tech just beat Texas and Lubbock. West Virginia, I still don't think West Virginia is very good, but they've at least shown that they have a pulse. They're alive over there. And you go to Morgantown in November. You got to go to Ames. I mean, there's not a lot of, I'm looking now. I'm totally changed my tune and speaking out of both sides of my mouth. But you look at it, and it doesn't really feel like there's that many gimmies on the schedule anymore. Even Kansas, the way they're playing and what Jalen Daniels is doing, I mean, he's a problem right now. I mean, he comes into Norman this past weekend after what Adrian Martinez just did. They've been rough. So, man, what a conference. This is kind of preparing Oklahoma a little bit for the move to the SEC in terms of there's no gimmies in that league. Every week is going to be a grind, and that's how this year is for the Big 12. It's going to be a mess, and I think the Big 12 is probably going to end up being a victim of it in the end because probably nobody will make the playoff because everybody will beat up on each other, and everybody's going to have 2 losses by the time we get to the end. So we'll see, but it's a really entertaining league all of a sudden this year. Look forward to seeing in the last year of this iteration of the Big 12. It's going out with a bang, so it's going to be fun to see how this all shakes out.
I mean, this doesn't stick to the script, but I want to ask you guys, how much is Lincoln Riley conferring with his brother this week? Offensive coordinator Garrett Riley from TCU.
Well, I mean, based off of Garrett Riley not being able to get a job on Lincoln's staff, are they conferring? Do they normally confer? Because that was always a very weird storyline. Like when Oklahoma and Kansas played that year, and Lincoln looked very uncomfortable talking about Garrett Riley.
Yeah, that was at Kansas, and that was a Kansas team that absolutely was dreadful. But I think he's getting some career advice from his parents and his mentors. Don't hire your brother. Let him prove himself first, then hire him. And that's what Garrett's trying to do right now at TCU. They're putting up some good numbers. Like I said, they haven't played anybody, but, man, OU fans don't want to lose to Garrett Riley this week.
Definitely not. And, yeah, I mean, as far as going back to Kansas, I mean, is Nebraska paying attention? Are they alive? Because Lance Leipold or Chris Kleiman, you need to just make them move one state up. Those are the guys that they need to get. One of the two. And we'll see what they end up doing. But Lance Leipold, he's like coach of the year already. Like, lock it in. They're 4-0. Kansas. It's crazy.
They're 4-0. And I was doing this exercise because I actually think that the TV networks have done a very good job of being disciplined and not throwing Heisman Trophy crap in our face through September. But in my head, I was like, okay, if I were to build a Heisman just quarterback watch list, not everyone across the country, but just like the quarterbacks that have played up to that level, I was trying to think nationally, what would the cutoff be? Like, where do you stop? And I was like, okay, Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, those guys have played really well.
Yep.
Hendon Hooker at Tennessee's been awesome, right? Michael Penix Jr. out at Washington's been awesome. I left Caleb Williams off that list because he really struggled against Oregon State. There's 2 more guys. Spencer Sanders makes sense, and Jalen Daniels, like 2 of the 6 in my mind. And if I could be missing someone from across the country, but 2 of the 6 Big 12 quarterbacks, one of them being a Kansas quarterback. What?
Yeah.
Come again?
It's pretty insane. Maybe Stetson Bennett, just because he's put up big numbers. But yeah, I mean, Jalen Daniels has been right he is a problem. So I'm excited to see him in person here in a few weeks in Norman, Kansas. Not a pushover anymore by any stretch. Lance Leipold, unbelievable job. Looking at the NFL to wrap up, Jalen Hurts is balling. I don't know what's going on. We talked about this a little bit last week, but it's 3 weeks. The season's a lot longer than that. It's 18 weeks. But if you gave an MVP out right now, it's probably Jalen Hurts, which is outrageous. So far this year, and I sent this stat to you guys because it's just mind-blowing, 916 passing yards, 167 rushing yards. He's the only player in league history to have 900 passing yards and 150 rushing yards in the first 3 games of a season. Only guy ever. That's insane. He's balling out. The Eagles look like they're legit contenders. I mean, Jalen Hurts, what can you say? I mean, even the biggest OU homers didn't really see Jalen Hurts being this in the NFL, and he's a legitimate starter, and like I said, probably the MVP of the league right now. Again, 3 weeks in, but it's unbelievable.
Yeah, I'd say he might be in the conversation for front runner for the MVP. It's shocking. It just is. Of Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, and Jalen Hurts in consecutive years. If you said who would be the best and who would be the worst, I would have said Kyler Murray will be the best, and I would have said Jalen Hurts will be the worst. Here we are 3 years into this thing, and Jalen is he's at the top of the list. How did that happen? He works harder than anybody. He's serious about his craft. He doesn't goof around. He doesn't delete his Instagram posts, and he doesn't make commercials, for Progressive. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I'm not knocking those guys. I'm just saying there are things happening in their lives in addition to football. What is it that defines Jalen Hurts? Football. That's all he cares about. And you've seen the progression. You've seen the improvements. It's been shocking. And congratulations. Shocking because of what we perceive Jalen Hurts to be, and he's evolved beyond that. So that part is not shocking, the fact that he's worked and evolved his game to look like an NFL quarterback. That part's not shocking.
Yeah, it's stunning that the 2 quarterbacks evolved, right, in the very famous national championship game. Tua and Jalen are the 2 3-0 quarterbacks in the league right now.
Yep.
And coming out of that game and into that offseason, if anyone had told you that, they would have said, what? But
yeah.
We can see it with Tua, and Jalen Hurts just got benched because Alabama couldn't throw the ball forward. And to come here to I think it's a credit to him to put himself in a very different offense, right? Coming to Oklahoma, not afraid of that, hey, you're not going to be the run first guy, all that, to go through those growing pains. It wasn't perfect, all that stuff, to continue to grow into the NFL. It's just very impressive because he's continued to take those steps up as the competition's got much harder, as what's been asked of him has gotten much harder.
Yeah, definitely. That's Lincoln Riley's biggest recruiting thing that he's got going right now. Did you see Jalen Hurts, Alabama? He got benched and was essentially a running back playing quarterback. And now look at him. After 1 year at Oklahoma, reinvented him, Heisman runner-up. He had no NFL future before that OU season. So it's really, anybody can make Kyler Murray good. That guy's insane. Yep. Baker, obviously is Baker and his drive and all that's been well documented. Him coming, he actually committed to play for Bob first and stuff like that. But Lincoln's got to be circling Jalen Hurts like, look what I did with this guy, because it really is insane what he's doing. And we'll see if he can keep it up. And if the Eagles can continue to roll the way they have, they look great right now. So we'll see how that shakes out. All right, I think that's it. That's it for us. We'll be in Fort Worth this weekend. The AllSooners crew will be heading down south, then coming back for a few days, and then going back south again for OU Texas game the following weekend. I swear those are always stacked on top of each other. It's burning my brain that it is. So we'll be heading down there 2 weekends in a row. Looking forward to it this weekend. No clue what's going to happen in this game, but I'm excited for it. M&G Carter Stadium, and we'll have all the coverage for you on allsooners.com. Lots of preview to this game leading up to Saturday, and of course Saturday morning. Stick with us all throughout game day. We'll have all the reaction, recaps, everything you could want on Saturday after the Sooners take on the Frogs down in Fort Worth. All right, that's it. Thank you so much for listening. Be sure and catch our post-game show. We'll record it at M&G Carter Stadium on Saturday after the game. You can listen to that one. Why is Hoove laughing?
Hopefully they don't kick us out, lock us in, take us away. It's going to be late. Even though it's an 11 a.m. kickoff, it's going to be late.
The Nebraska one was like about 8-ish, which is absurd when you think about it. But we'll try and get on it a little bit. Nebraska.
That's right.
Nebraska, it wasn't too bad.
Yeah,
it wasn't too bad.
We were leaving by about 7:15, 7:30 in Lincoln. I think the security people all looked at us very sideways this past Saturday. They're like, people are still in the building? Yep. It's 3:30 in the morning.
Yep.
I don't know. Really, we're at the mercy of what is the Wi-Fi situation at Amity Carter. Because if the Wi-Fi is good, that helps us tremendously. If it's not, it slows the process down a lot. So we'll see. But we're going to record the post-game show Saturday night, Amity Carter. Be sure to keep a lookout for that. Of course, you can listen to that show on iTunes, Spotify, Google, iHeart, wherever you get your podcasts. If you have an Amazon-enabled device, just say, Alexa, play the AllSooners podcast. Also post on our website, of course, allsooners.com. Click on the playlist on your phone, your tablet, or your computer, and you can watch all the podcasts on Hoover's YouTube page, John Hoover Media. Like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube stuff that people say. Do it. It helps us out and keeps the podcast churning. So there you have it. That's it for us for now. We'll see you Saturday in Fort Worth. For Ryan Chapman and John Hoover, I'm Josh Callaway. We'll catch you guys next time.